The banker's daughter stood in the dusty telegraph office with rolled blueprints under her arm, and every man in Cripple Creek, Colorado laughed when she said she wanted to build the first woman-owned hotel in the territory. It was 1878, and Katherine Townsend had just turned 22 years old. Her father had been dead 3 months, and the bank had already foreclosed on everything except the small plot of land at the edge of town that nobody wanted, because it sat too close to the mining camps and too far from respectability. A hotel, run by a woman. The telegraph operator slapped his knee, his weathered face crinkling with amusement. "Miss Townsend, you ought to find yourself a husband and let him worry about business matters. That's the natural order of things." Katherine felt heat rise to her cheeks, but she kept her voice steady. "My father taught me bookkeeping, management, and hospitality. I know every aspect of running an establishment, and that land is all I have left." "Your daddy spoiled you with all that learning," another man chimed in from the corner, a merchant she had known since childhood. "Filled your head with notions that do not serve a young lady. You will embarrass yourself, lose what little you have, and end up worse off than before." She walked out of that office with her blueprints still rolled tight under her arm, and her dreams feeling heavier than the summer sun beating down on the red dirt streets. Cripple Creek was growing fast, with the gold strikes bringing new prospectors every week, but growth did not mean progress when it came to how people saw women. Her father had believed she could do anything. The rest of the town believed she should do nothing but find a man to take care of her. The problem was that Katherine had no interest in being taken care of. She wanted to build something that mattered, something that would last beyond her lifetime. The hotel she envisioned would not be fancy, but it would be clean, safe, and welcoming. She had watched her father run the bank with integrity, treating every customer with respect regardless of their station, and she wanted to bring that same philosophy to hospitality. But wanting and doing were separated by a canyon of obstacles, the least of which was money and the greatest of which was the fact that no one would take her seriously. She made her way down Bennett Avenue, past the saloons and supply stores, toward the small cabin she now called home. It had belonged to a prospector who died in a cave-in, and she had bought it for almost nothing with the last of her savings. The cabin sat on the outskirts of town, near the land she owned, and while it was not much, it was hers. She had scrubbed it clean, patched the roof, and made it livable. Living alone was another thing that made the town gossip, but Katherine had stopped caring what people whispered behind gloved hands. As she walked, she noticed a man standing near her property line, studying the empty lot with obvious interest. He was tall and lean, wearing dusty trail clothes and a hat that had seen better days. His horse, a sturdy buckskin, was tied to a post nearby. Katherine approached cautiously, clutching her blueprints a little tighter. "Can I help you?" she called out. The man turned, and she saw a face that was sun-weathered but kind, with eyes the color of creek water and a jaw shadowed with several days of stubble. He looked to be in his mid-20s, maybe 26 or 27, and when he smiled, it reached those water-colored eyes. "I hope so," he said, his voice carrying a slight drawl that spoke of time spent farther south. "I am looking for work, and I heard in town that someone might be building on this lot. Name is Preston Parker." Katherine hesitated. She had not told anyone her specific plans, only that general announcement in the telegraph office that had earned her nothing but mockery. "Where did you hear that?" "Fellow at the livery mentioned Miss Townsend owned this land and had big ideas for it." Said it with a laugh, to be honest, like it was a joke. Preston's expression sobered. "But I have learned that the things men laugh at are often the things worth paying attention to, so I came to see for myself." Something in his tone made Katherine straighten her shoulders. "I am Katherine Townsend, and yes, I plan to build a hotel here, though I should tell you right now that I cannot pay much and the whole town thinks I am foolish for trying." Preston looked at the land again, then back at her. "What do you think?" The question caught her off guard. No one had asked her what she thought in months. They had told her what to think, what to do, what was proper and possible. But this stranger, this dusty cowboy who looked like he had ridden hard and longed to get to Cripple Creek, was asking her opinion. "I think," she said slowly, "that this town needs a respectable place for families and working men to stay. Not a boarding house with bed bugs and watered-down stew, and not a fancy hotel that costs a week's wages for one night. Something in between. Something honest." Preston nodded, a slight smile playing at the corner of his mouth. "That sounds like a dream worth building. Most people think it is just a dream, a foolish one." "Most people are afraid of dreams," Preston said. He walked closer, his boots kicking up small clouds of dust. "They see someone reaching for something better, and it reminds them of all the things they were too scared to reach for themselves. So they mock it, try to cut it down to size, make themselves feel better about their own fears." Katherine found herself studying this stranger with new interest. "You sound like you know something about dreams." "I know something about being laughed at for having them," Preston said. "I grew up on a ranch in Texas, and I wanted to learn more than just cattle and horses, wanted to understand building, engineering, how things fit together. My brothers thought I was wasting time with books and measuring tools when I should have been in the saddle, so I left. Been working construction jobs across the West for 3 years now, learning everything I can. Why Cripple Creek? Heard about the gold strikes, figured there would be building work. But I will be honest with you, Miss Townsend. I am tired of working for men who cut corners and cheat on quality just to save $1. If you are serious about building something honest, something that will last, then I would like to help make that happen, even if you can only pay a little." Katherine looked at Preston Parker, this stranger who had appeared at exactly the moment when she needed someone to believe in her vision, and she felt something shift inside her chest. It was not quite hope, not yet, but it was close. It was possibility. "I can pay you $2 a day once construction starts," she said. "And meals. I am a decent cook, but I need to finalize the plans first, and I need to order materials, and I need to figure out how to afford it all without going into debt I cannot repay. Can I see those blueprints?" Preston asked. Katherine unrolled them on the ground, weighing down the corners with rocks. The plans showed a 2-story building with 12 rooms, a dining area on the first floor, and a wide front porch. Preston knelt down, studying the design with the careful attention of someone who actually knew what he was looking at. "Did you draw these yourself?" he asked. "With my father's help before he died. He believed in this project. He was going to loan me the money from the bank, but then he had a heart attack, and the new bank president called in all the outstanding debts. We lost everything except this land because it was deeded in my name separately." Preston traced a finger along one of the walls on the blueprint. "This is good work. Solid design. But if you want to save money, I would suggest a few changes. See here how you have the load-bearing walls. If we shift this one over by 3 feet and add a support beam here, we can use less lumber and actually make the structure stronger." Katherine leaned in to see what he meant, and for the next hour they knelt in the dirt together, redesigning her hotel. Preston asked questions about her vision, what she wanted guests to feel when they walked in, how she planned to furnish the rooms, what kind of atmosphere she hoped to create. He listened to every answer, and then showed her how to translate those dreams into practical construction choices that would save money without sacrificing quality. By the time the sun started sinking toward the mountains, Catherine's knees ached from kneeling. Her hands were smudged with dirt from adjusting the blueprints, and she felt more alive than she had in months. "I think we can build this for about $300 less than your original estimate," Preston said. "If we are smart about sourcing materials, and if I do most of the skilled labor myself. We would need to hire day laborers for the heavy lifting and foundation work, but the finish work I can handle." $300 less. Catherine could hardly believe it. That was money she could use for furnishings, for linens, for all the small touches that would make her hotel special. "Maybe more, depending on what deals we can strike with the lumber mill." Preston stood and offered her a hand up. His palm was calloused and warm, and Catherine felt an unexpected flutter in her stomach as their hands touched. She pushed the feeling away, focusing on business. "Why are you helping me?" she asked. "You do not know me. This project might fail. I might not be able to pay you some weeks." Preston looked at her with those creek water eyes, and his expression was completely sincere. "Because when you talked about your hotel, about what you want to build, I heard something real, something worth making. And because when I left Texas, I made myself a promise that I would only work on things that mattered. This matters. You are taking a chance on me." "You are taking a chance on me too," Preston pointed out. "For all you know, I am a terrible carpenter who will build you a hotel that falls down in the first strong wind." Catherine found herself smiling despite the long, difficult day. "Are you a terrible carpenter?" "No, madam. I am actually very good at what I do." "Then I suppose we have a partnership, Mr. Parker." "Preston," he said, "if we are going to build a hotel together, we should probably use first names, unless you prefer formality." "Catherine is fine," she said. "Or Kate. My father called me Kate." "Kate suits you better," Preston said, and there was something in the way he said it that made her cheeks warm. They shook hands on their agreement as the sunset painted the Colorado sky in shades of orange and gold. It was a small moment, a simple handshake between two people who had known each other for only a few hours, but Catherine felt like it meant something larger. For the first time since her father's death, she did not feel alone in her dreams. Over the next week, Preston stayed in town, taking a room at one of the boarding houses Catherine had described as having bed bugs and watered-down stew. He spent his days meeting with suppliers, negotiating prices, and refining the construction plans. Catherine spent her time working through the finances, trying to stretch every dollar as far as it would go. She had some money saved from helping her father at the bank, but it was not much, barely enough to get the foundation laid and the frame raised. They met every evening at her cabin, spreading papers across the small table and working by lamplight. Catherine cooked simple meals, beans and cornbread mostly, and Preston ate like he appreciated every bite. He told her stories about his travels, about the buildings he had worked on from El Paso to Santa Fe, about the beauty and hardship of the frontier. She told him about growing up in Cripple Creek, about her mother who had died when she was young, about her father who had believed that women were just as capable as men if given the chance. "He sounds like he was a good man," Preston said one night, soaking up the last of his beans with a piece of cornbread. "He was the best man I ever knew," Catherine said softly. "Everyone respected him. When he died, I thought some of that respect would transfer to me, that people would see I had learned from him. But instead, they just saw a girl with ideas above her station." "Their loss," Preston said firmly. "And in a few months, when your hotel is standing and guests are checking in, those same people will be pretending they supported you all along." Catherine laughed, but it was a bitter sound. "I doubt that. This town has a long memory for unconventional behavior. I will always be the banker's daughter who thought she could run a business." Preston set down his plate and leaned forward, his expression serious. Kate, listen to me. What you are doing takes courage, real courage, the kind most people do not have. You have been mocked, dismissed, and probably insulted more times than I can count. But you are still here, still planning, still believing in your vision. That is not foolishness. That is strength. His words settled over her like a warm blanket, comforting and solid. She met his eyes across the small table and felt that flutter in her stomach again, stronger this time. She had been so focused on her hotel, on survival, that she had not allowed herself to think about Preston as anything other than a partner in this venture. But sitting here in the lamplight, seeing the conviction in his face, the way he believed in her, she felt something deeper stirring. Thank you, she said quietly, for seeing me as more than a foolish girl. I see you exactly as you are, Preston said. A woman with a dream and the determination to make it real. And if you will let me, I would like to dream with you. Build this hotel together, make something lasting. The way he said it, dream with me, made Catherine's heart race. There was an intimacy to the words that went beyond construction plans and financial projections. She should have been cautious, should have protected herself from disappointment, but instead she found herself nodding. I would like that, she said. Dreaming together sounds better than dreaming alone. Preston smiled, and the warmth of it filled the small cabin. They went back to their papers, but something had shifted between them, an understanding that this partnership was becoming more than just business. Construction began on a Monday morning in late July. Preston had managed to hire 4-day laborers, miners who wanted extra work during their off hours, and had negotiated a good price on lumber from the mill. Katherine wore her oldest dress and a pair of boots she had bought from the general store, ready to work alongside the men despite the scandalous nature of such behavior. The first person to comment was Harold Jenkins, one of the miners Preston had hired. He looked at Katherine with obvious skepticism. You planning to actually work, Miss Townsend, or just watch? I am planning to work, Katherine said evenly. I can hammer nails, carry boards, and mix mortar. My father taught me. Harold exchanged glances with the other men, and Katherine saw the doubt written clearly on their faces. She had expected this. Preston stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. Miss Townsend is as much a part of this crew as any of us. She works, she gets treated with respect. That clear. There was a moment of tension, and then Harold shrugged. Your money, Parker. If the lady wants to get dirty, that is her choice. It was not exactly an endorsement, but it was enough. They started with the foundation, digging trenches and laying stones. It was back-breaking work under the July sun, and within an hour, Katherine's hands were blistered and her dress was soaked with sweat. But she kept pace with the men, refusing to slow down or complain. Preston worked beside her, occasionally offering quiet advice about technique, but never treating her like she was incapable. By the end of the first day, they had completed a quarter of the foundation. Katherine's entire body ached in ways she had not known were possible, but when she looked at the work they had accomplished, she felt a surge of pride. This was real. This was happening. You did good today, Preston said as the other workers headed back to town. He handed her a dipper of water from the barrel they kept on site. Better than most people on their first day of construction. Katherine drank deeply, the water cool and sweet. I hurt in places I did not know I had. Preston laughed. That will get better. Your body will adjust. But you should probably soak your hands tonight. Those blisters will get worse if you do not care for them. I will. She looked at the foundation again, at the tangible proof of progress. Preston, do you really think we can do this? Build the whole hotel? I know we can, he said with absolute certainty. It will take work and there will be problems, but we will solve them. Together. That word together was becoming Catherine's favorite word. She had spent so long feeling isolated, fighting alone against the doubts and mockery, that having someone to stand beside her felt like a gift she had not known to ask for. As the weeks passed, the hotel began to take shape. The foundation was completed, then the frame started rising against the Colorado sky. Katherine worked every day, her hands toughening into calluses, her body growing stronger from the physical labor. Preston was always there, teaching her, encouraging her, treating her like a true partner. The other workers gradually warmed to her presence, especially after she proved she could outwork most of them when it came to the detailed finish carpentry that Preston taught her. But not everyone in town was warming to her endeavor. One afternoon, as Katherine was returning from the general store with supplies, she encountered a group of women she had known since childhood. They stood in a cluster outside the church, their crisp dresses and proper bonnets a stark contrast to Katherine's work-stained clothing. "Katherine Townsend, what has become of you?" asked Margaret Simpson, the minister's wife. "You look like a common laborer. It is disgraceful." "I am building my hotel," Katherine said, trying to keep her voice polite. "It requires work." "It requires sense, which you clearly lack," Margaret said sharply. "You are throwing away your last chance at respectability. No decent man will marry you after this. You are covered in dirt, working alongside rough men, behaving in a manner that is completely unladylike." Another woman, Sarah Preston, chimed in. "Your poor father would be ashamed to see what you have become. He raised you better than this." The words stung because they touched on Katherine's deepest fear, that her father would be disappointed in how she was handling his legacy. But then she thought about the conversations they had shared, about his belief in her capabilities, and she lifted her chin. "My father taught me to work hard and build something meaningful. That is exactly what I am doing. If that makes me unladylike in your eyes, then I suppose I will have to live with that." "You will live with being alone," Margaret said coldly. "Mark my words, Katherine. You will end up a spinster running a failing hotel with no family and no future. Is that really what you want?" Before Katherine could respond, a familiar voice cut through the tension. "Excuse me, ladies." Preston had appeared, carrying a load of lumber on his shoulder. He set it down carefully and removed his hat, nodding politely to the women. "I could not help but overhear your concerns about Miss Townsend's future. I want you to know that what she is building is remarkable. That hotel is going to be the finest establishment in Cripple Creek, and she is making it happen through intelligence, determination, and skill. Any man would be lucky to stand beside a woman like that." The way he said it, with such conviction and respect, made Katherine's heart skip. Margaret and the other women looked taken aback, clearly not expecting a man, especially a handsome cowboy like Preston, to defend Katherine's choices. "Well," Margaret said stiffly, "I suppose some men have different standards." "I suppose some men recognize strength when they see it," Preston replied evenly. "Good day, ladies." He picked up his lumber and continued toward the construction site. Katherine followed, her emotions swirling between gratitude, embarrassment, and something deeper that she was not quite ready to name. "You did not have to do that," she said when they were out of earshot. "Yes, I did," Preston said. "I meant every word, Kate. What you are doing is remarkable. Do not let small-minded people convince you otherwise. They think I am throwing my life away." Preston set down the lumber at the construction site and turned to face her fully. "Are you throwing your life away?" "No," Katherine said firmly. "I am building exactly the life I want." "Then that is all that matters." He paused, seeming to wrestle with something internal. "Kate, I know we have not known each other long, and I know we are supposed to be focused on this hotel, but I need to say something." Katherine's pulse quickened. "What is it?" I did not come to Cripple Creek looking for anything but work. But then I met you, and I saw your courage and your vision, and somewhere along the way, building this hotel stopped being just a job. It became something I care about deeply because you care about it, because I care about you." The words hung in the air between them, honest and vulnerable. Katherine felt tears prick at her eyes, but they were good tears, the kind that came from feeling seen and valued. "I care about you too," she admitted. "More than I probably should, given that we are business partners and people already talk about me enough." "Let them talk," Preston said. He reached out and gently took her hand, mindful of the healing blisters on her palms. "Kate, I do not know exactly where this is going, but I know I want to keep dreaming with you, building with you, being with you." Katherine looked down at their joined hands, at the evidence of hard work and shared purpose on both their skin. Then she looked up into Preston's eyes and saw everything she had been afraid to hope for: respect, partnership, and the beginning of something that felt like love. "I want that too," she whispered. Preston smiled, that warm smile that always made her feel like she could accomplish anything, and leaned down slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. She did not want to. When his lips met hers, it was gentle and sweet, a kiss that tasted like promises and possibility. When they parted, Katherine felt like the world had shifted on its axis, reordering itself around this new reality where she was not alone in her dreams. "We should probably get back to work," she said, but she was smiling. "Probably," Preston agreed, but he did not let go of her hand right away. They stood there for another moment, just the two of them in the shadow of the hotel they were building together, and Katherine felt happier than she could ever remember being. The construction continued through August and into September. The frame was completed, the roof went on, and the interior walls started going up. Katherine and Preston worked side by side every day, their partnership deepening both professionally and personally. They stole moments together when the other workers had gone home, sharing kisses in the evening light and making plans not just for the hotel, but for the future they were beginning to imagine together. But challenges continued to arise. The bank, now run by Thomas Crawford, a man who had never liked Katherine's father and liked Katherine even less, began making noise about the taxes owed on her property. He showed up at the construction site one afternoon with papers in hand and a smug expression on his face. "Miss Townsend, you owe $200 in back taxes on this land," he announced loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Payment is due by the end of the month or the property will be seized and auctioned." Katherine felt her stomach drop. "That cannot be right. My father always paid the taxes on time. I checked the records." "These are penalties that have accrued since your father's death," Crawford said. "Administrative fees, processing charges, interest on delayed payments. It is all perfectly legal and documented." Preston stepped forward, his expression hard. "That sounds like invented charges to me. Let me see those documents." Crawford handed them over reluctantly, and Preston read through them carefully. Katherine watched his jaw tighten as he absorbed the information. "These fees are excessive," Preston said. "Some of them seem completely fabricated, filing charges for documents that were already on file, processing fees for routine assessments. This is predatory." "This is business," Crawford said coldly. "If Miss Townsend cannot manage the financial responsibilities of property ownership, perhaps she should not own property. The taxes are due by the 30th of this month. Good day." He left, and Katherine felt panic rising in her chest. "Preston, I do not have $200. I have been pouring everything into materials and wages. Even if I stopped construction right now, I could not come up with that much money." Preston set the papers down and pulled her close, right there in front of the half-built hotel and the workers who were trying to pretend they were not listening. "We will figure this out. I have some savings, about $75. That is yours." "I cannot take your savings," Katherine protested. "It is not taking, it is investing. In us, in this hotel, in our future." He pulled back to look at her face. "Kate, I love you. I think I have loved you since that first day when you stood there with your blueprints and told me about your dreams. I am not going to let Crawford or anyone else take this away from you." It was the first time either of them had said the word love out loud, and Katherine felt it settle into her bones like something she had been waiting her whole life to hear. "I love you too," she said. "But even with your $75, we are still more than 100 short." "Then we will find it." Preston's voice was determined. "We will sell something, take out a loan, find investors. There has to be a way." Over the next 2 weeks, they tried everything. Preston sold his horse, which broke Katherine's heart, but he insisted was necessary. She sold what little jewelry she had inherited from her mother. They approached every businessman in town looking for a loan or an investment, but no one was willing to put money into a project run by a woman, especially not with Crawford spreading rumors that Katherine was financially incompetent, and the hotel would never be completed. With 3 days left until the deadline, they were still $40 short. Katherine sat in her cabin, adding up numbers for the 100th time, hoping somehow the math would change. Preston sat across from her, looking as frustrated as she felt. "There has to be something we are missing," he said. "Some option we have not considered." A knock at the door interrupted them. Katherine opened it to find Harold Jenkins, the miner who had been skeptical of her on the first day of construction. He stood on her doorstep with his hat in his hands and an uncomfortable expression on his face. "Miss Townsend, I heard about your trouble with the taxes," he said. "The crew has been talking, and well, we took up a collection. It is not much, but we want to help." He handed her a leather pouch heavy with coins. Katherine opened it with shaking hands and poured the contents onto her table. There were silver dollars, half-dollars, even some quarters and dimes. She counted quickly and felt tears spring to her eyes. "This is $42, she said, her voice breaking. "Like I said, it is not much," Harold said gruffly. "But you have worked harder than any woman I have ever seen, and that hotel is going to be something special. We do not want to see Crawford steal it from you just because he can." Katherine could not speak. She was crying too hard, overwhelmed by the unexpected kindness. Preston stood and shook Harold's hand firmly. "Thank you," he said. "This means more than you know." "Just finish the hotel," Harold said, "and maybe give us a discount when we need a room." He left, and Katherine collapsed into Preston's arms, crying tears of relief and gratitude. They had enough now. They could pay Crawford and keep the land and finish building their dream. The next day, Katherine walked into the bank with Preston beside her and $200 in a leather pouch. Crawford looked surprised and disappointed to see them. "I am here to pay the taxes on my property," Katherine said, her voice steady and strong. She counted out the money onto his desk, making sure every dollar was accounted for. "That is $200. I expect a receipt showing the payment in full and all claims against the property satisfied." Crawford's face reddened, but he had no choice but to process the payment and provide the receipt. Katherine folded it carefully and put it in her pocket, a tangible piece of security. "You may have scraped together enough for this payment," Crawford said coldly. "But you will never make a success of that hotel. You will fail, Miss Townsend, and when you do, I will be there to foreclose." "Then I guess you will be waiting a long time," Katherine said. She turned and walked out with her head high, Preston right beside her. Outside the bank, Preston pulled her into a quick embrace. "I am so proud of you," he said into her hair. "We did it together," Katherine said, All of it. I could not have done any of this without you. Partners, Preston said. Partners, Katherine agreed. But they both knew it was more than that. They were building a life together, not just a hotel. Construction resumed with renewed energy. The interior walls went up, the windows were installed, and Preston began work on the fine details that would make the hotel special. Katherine painted walls, sewed curtains, and scoured auctions for furniture that was affordable but still quality. Every evening, exhausted and covered in sawdust or paint, they would sit together and marvel at what they had created. In late October, as the aspen trees turned gold on the mountainsides, the hotel was finally complete. It stood 2 stories tall, painted white with dark green trim, with a wide front porch that invited guests to sit and enjoy the view of the mountains. Inside, 12 rooms were furnished simply but comfortably, with clean linens and handmade quilts. The dining area on the first floor featured tables that Preston had built himself, sanded smooth and finished to a warm glow. Katherine stood in the lobby on the morning of their grand opening, looking at everything they had accomplished. A hand-carved sign hung above the front desk. Townsend Hotel, established 1878. Preston came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Terrified," Katherine admitted. "What if no one comes? What if people boycott because it is run by a woman?" "Then we will prove them wrong, one guest at a time," Preston said, "but I do not think that will happen. Look." He pointed out the window, and Katherine saw something that made her heart soar. People were walking toward the hotel. Not just 1 or 2, but a dozen at least, curiosity evident on their faces. She recognized some of them, townspeople who had ignored her or mocked her months ago. But they were coming to see what she had built. The first guest to check in was Harold Jenkins. He slapped $4 down on the desk and grinned. "I want your best room for 2 nights," he said. "Figure I should be the first official guest, considering I helped build the place." "Room 5 is our finest," Katherine said, her hands shaking slightly as she wrote his name in the ledger. "Thank you, Harold, for everything." More guests followed throughout the day. Some were miners looking for a clean place to stay between shifts. Others were families passing through, drawn by the reasonable prices and the appealing exterior. A few were curiosity seekers who wanted to see the hotel that had been the subject of so much gossip, but they all left impressed. The rooms were comfortable, the prices fair, and Katherine's attention to detail evident in every corner. By evening, 8 of the 12 rooms were occupied, and Katherine had deposits on 2 more for the following week. She and Preston sat together on the front porch after the last guest had checked in, watching the stars come out over the mountains. "We did it," she said softly. "We actually did it." "You did it," Preston corrected. "This was your dream, your vision. I just helped make it real." "You did more than help," Katherine said. She turned to face him, taking both his hands in hers. "Preston, you believed in me when no one else did. You stood beside me through every obstacle. You gave me your savings, your time, your heart. This hotel belongs to both of us." Preston was quiet for a moment, and then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Katherine's breath caught. "I have been carrying this for 3 weeks," he said, "waiting for the right moment. I bought it with the money I got from selling my saddle, which I probably should have mentioned before." "Preston, you sold your saddle." "I can always get another saddle," he said. "But I am only ever going to ask one woman to marry me." He opened the box to reveal a simple gold band with a small but beautiful sapphire set in the center. "Kate Townsend, will you marry me? Will you let me dream with you for the rest of our lives?" Katherine was crying again, but this time they were tears of pure joy. "Yes," she said. "Yes, absolutely yes." Preston slid the ring onto her finger, and then he kissed her there on the porch of the hotel they had built together, under the Colorado stars. And Katherine felt like every hardship, every moment of doubt, every instance of mockery had been worth it to arrive at this perfect moment. They were married 3 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the church. Despite the gossip and the initial disapproval, many townspeople attended, won over by the success of the hotel and the obvious love between Katherine and Preston. Harold Jenkins stood up as Preston's best man, and even Margaret Simpson, the minister's wife who had predicted Katherine's spinster future, had the grace to look embarrassed by her earlier pronouncements. Katherine wore a dress she had sewn herself, cream-colored with lace at the collar, and carried wildflowers that Preston had picked that morning. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Preston kissed her with such tenderness that Katherine heard more than one woman in the congregation sigh. They held the reception at the hotel, transforming the dining area into a celebration space. The workers who had helped build the place came, along with guests who were staying at the hotel and townspeople who had come to see the woman who had defied expectations. There was dancing and food and laughter, and Katherine felt surrounded by more goodwill than she had thought possible 6 months ago. As the evening wound down and guests began to depart, Katherine stood with Preston in the lobby of their hotel, his arm around her waist, her head on his shoulder. "What are you thinking?" Preston asked. "I am thinking about the day I walked out of the telegraph office with everyone laughing at my dreams," Katherine said. "I felt so alone, so certain that I would fail, and then you appeared like some kind of answer to a prayer I had not known to say." "I felt the same way when I met you," Preston said. "I had been drifting, working jobs that did not mean anything, searching for something without knowing what it was. And then there you were, this fierce woman with blueprints and dreams, and suddenly everything made sense." "Dream with me," you said, Katherine remembered, "and we will make them real." "We did make them real," Preston said. He looked around the lobby at the gleaming wood and clean windows and the life they had built together. "And this is just the beginning. We have so many more dreams to chase, Kate. So many more things to build together." Katherine turned in his arms and kissed him, tasting love and promise and all the beautiful possibilities of their future. Outside, the wind whispered through the Colorado pines, and inside, the Townsend Hotel stood solid and strong, a testament to what could happen when two people dared to dream together. The hotel thrived in the months that followed. Word spread about the clean rooms, fair prices, and the exceptional hospitality provided by the young couple who ran it. Katherine and Preston worked as a perfect team, she managing the books and guest services while he handled maintenance and improvements. They hired 2 young women from town to help with cleaning and cooking, giving them jobs when few respectable positions were available for unmarried women. As winter settled over Cripple Creek, the hotel became a gathering place for the community. Katherine started serving Sunday dinners that were open to anyone who could pay the modest price, and the dining room filled with miners, families, and travelers grateful for good food and warm company. Preston built a large fireplace in the lobby, and guests would gather there in the evenings to share stories and news. It was during one of these evenings, in early February of 1879, that Katherine realized she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks but had not said anything, wanting to be certain. When she finally told Preston, they were alone in their private quarters on the 2nd floor, a small suite of rooms they had furnished as their home. "Are you certain?" Preston asked, his face a mixture of joy and concern. "As certain as I can be," Katherine said. "Probably due in late summer." Preston pulled her close, his hand resting gently on her still flat stomach. We are going to have a baby, a son or daughter. Kate, this is incredible. Are you happy?" Katherine asked, suddenly nervous. They had never discussed children, too focused on building the hotel and establishing their business. "Happy does not begin to cover it," Preston said. "I am going to be a father. You are going to be a mother. We are going to raise a child in this hotel that we built with our own hands." How could I be anything but overjoyed? His enthusiasm eased Katherine's fears, and she allowed herself to feel the full weight of this new dream taking shape inside her. They were going to be parents. They were going to create a family. The pregnancy progressed smoothly, though Katherine continued working at the hotel much to the concern of some townspeople who thought she should be resting in bed. But Katherine had never been good at sitting still, and she found comfort in the familiar routines of running the hotel. Preston was endlessly protective, always trying to take on extra work so she could rest, but Katherine refused to be treated like she was fragile. "I am growing a human, not dying of consumption," she told him one afternoon when he tried to prevent her from carrying a stack of linens up the stairs. "Women have been having babies and working for thousands of years." "Women have," Preston agreed. "But none of them were carrying my child, so excuse me for being concerned." His concern was sweet, even when it bordered on overbearing, and Katherine loved him for it. They spent the evenings planning for their baby, converting a small storage room next to their quarters into a nursery. Preston built a cradle from pine wood, sanding it until it was smooth as silk, and Katherine sewed blankets and tiny clothes, imagining the small person who would wear them in late August. As the aspen trees began their transformation from green to gold, Katherine went into labor. Preston, who had remained calm through construction disasters and financial crises, turned pale and panicky at the first contraction. "It is too soon," he said, even though Katherine was exactly on schedule according to her calculations. "Should I get the doctor? Should I boil water?" "I should do something. You should breathe," Katherine said, managing a smile despite the pain. "And yes, get the doctor. This baby is coming today." The labor lasted 12 hours, long enough that Preston wore a path in the wooden floor of their quarters with his pacing. Harold Jenkins and the other men who had helped build the hotel waited in the lobby, as anxious as expectant uncles. The two women who worked at the hotel assisted the doctor, bringing water and clean cloths and offering Katherine encouragement. When the baby finally arrived as the sun was setting, filling the room with golden light, it was a boy. He came into the world with a strong cry and a full head of dark hair. The doctor placed him in Katherine's arms, and she looked down at her son with wonder and exhaustion. "Preston," she called, and he was there in an instant, dropping to his knees beside the bed. "Kate, are you all right? Is the baby all right?" "We are perfect," Katherine said. "Meet your son." Preston looked at the tiny baby, his expression transforming from worry to pure awe. He reached out a tentative finger, and the baby immediately gripped it with surprising strength. "He is perfect," Preston whispered. "He is absolutely perfect. What should we name him?" They had discussed names throughout the pregnancy, but had not settled on anything definite. Katherine looked at her son, at Preston, at the life they had built together, and the answer came to her clearly. "Thomas," she said. "After my father, Thomas Parker." Preston's eyes filled with tears. "Your father would be so proud of you, Kate, of everything you have accomplished." "I wish he could have met his grandson. He would have loved you too," Katherine said softly. "He would have been grateful that I found someone who believes in me the way you do." They sat together, the three of them now, as night fell over Cripple Creek and the hotel quieted around them. Their son slept peacefully, unaware that he had been born into a legacy of dreams made real, into a family built on courage and love, and the refusal to accept limitations. The years that followed were full and rich. The hotel continued to thrive, expanding its reputation throughout Colorado. Katherine and Preston hired more staff as the business grew, always choosing people who needed opportunities and treating them fairly. They became known not just for their hospitality, but for their integrity, running their business with the same principles Katherine's father had taught her. Thomas grew into a bright, curious boy who loved helping around the hotel. By the time he was 3, he could greet guests with perfect politeness and knew every corner of the building. Katherine and Preston taught him to read using the hotel ledger, and he learned mathematics by counting money at the front desk. In the spring of 1882, when Thomas was 2.5, Katherine discovered she was pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was harder, complicated by sickness that lasted well beyond the first few months. Preston took on more of the hotel management, and their staff stepped up to help. Katherine spent much of her time resting, frustrated by the limitations but determined to keep their second child safe. In December, as snow blanketed the mountains, Katherine gave birth to twin daughters. The labor was difficult and dangerous, and there were moments when Preston feared he might lose his wife. But Katherine was as fierce in childbirth as she was in everything else, and after 14 hours of labor, 2 tiny girls entered the world. They named them Alice, after Preston's mother, and Rose, for the flowers that had adorned Katherine and Preston's wedding. The twins were small but healthy, with Katherine's dark eyes and Preston's strong lungs. Thomas was fascinated by his baby sisters, wanting to hold them constantly and help with every aspect of their care. The hotel adapted to accommodate their growing family. Preston converted another storage room into a second nursery, and Katherine learned to balance motherhood with business management in ways that continued to scandalize some of the more traditional townspeople. But she had long since stopped caring what others thought. She had proven that a woman could run a successful business, could be a wife and mother and entrepreneur all at once. When the twins were 6 months old, an unexpected visitor arrived at the hotel. Katherine was at the front desk, going over the books while Alice and Rose napped in a basket beside her when a well-dressed gentleman walked through the door. "Good afternoon," Katherine said, shifting into her professional demeanor. "Welcome to the Townsend Hotel. Do you need a room?" "Actually, I need to speak with the proprietor," the man said. "I understand that would be you, Mrs. Parker." "It would," Katherine confirmed, a small thrill running through her at being recognized as the proprietor without question or skepticism. "How can I help you?" "My name is William Richardson. I represent a group of businessmen from Denver who are interested in the hospitality industry. We have heard remarkable things about your establishment, about the quality of service and the innovative approach to guest relations. We would like to discuss a business proposition with you and your husband." Preston appeared from the back office, drawn by the sound of an unfamiliar voice. Katherine quickly introduced him to Richardson, and they moved to a private table in the dining area. One of their staff members took over at the front desk and kept an eye on the sleeping twins. Richardson explained that his group was looking to invest in small, well-run hotels throughout Colorado, helping them expand while maintaining their individual character. He offered to provide capital for the Townsend Hotel to add a 3rd floor and expand the dining facilities in exchange for a minority stake in the business. "We would not interfere with your management," Richardson assured them. "You have built something special here, and we want to help it grow, not change it. The offer is $2,500 in investment capital for a 20% stake." Katherine and Preston exchanged glances. It was a generous offer, one that would allow them to expand in ways they had only dreamed about, But it also meant bringing in outside partners, giving up some control. "Can we have time to consider?" Preston asked. "Of course," Richardson said. "I am staying in town for 3 days. Take your time and let me know." After he left, Katherine and Preston sat at the table, holding hands and talking through the decision. They discussed the benefits, the increased capacity, and the improvements they could make. They talked about the risks, about whether they could trust Richardson and his partners to honor their promise of non-interference. "What does your gut tell you?" Preston finally asked. Katherine thought about it, about how far they had come since that day she had stood with blueprints in the telegraph office. "I think we should do it," she said slowly. "We started this hotel because I wanted to build something that would last, something that mattered. If we can expand, we can provide more jobs, serve more guests, have a bigger impact on this community. That is worth the risk." "Then we agree," Preston said. "We will accept Richardson's offer." They met with Richardson the next day and negotiated a few additional terms to protect their interests. The contract was drawn up, signed, and suddenly, the Townsend Hotel had the resources to become something even greater than what Katherine had originally envisioned. Construction on the 3rd floor began that spring. This time, Katherine was not hauling lumber or hammering nails, busy as she was with 3 small children. But she was intimately involved in every design decision, every choice of materials, every detail of the expansion. Preston oversaw the actual construction, having learned so much from building the original hotel that he was now considered one of the finest builders in Cripple Creek. The expansion was completed in the fall of 1883. The 3rd floor added 8 more rooms, bringing the total to 20, and the expanded dining facilities could now seat 40 people comfortably. They hired more staff, including a full-time cook who freed Katherine to focus more on management and her family. The hotel's success exceeded everyone's expectations, including Katherine and Preston's. Within a year of the expansion, they were profitable enough to buy out Richardson's group, regaining full ownership of their establishment. Richardson, impressed by their business acumen, became a friend and occasionally sent other investment opportunities their way, though Katherine and Preston were selective about what they took on. As the 1880s progressed, Cripple Creek continued to grow, and the Townsend Hotel grew with it. Thomas started school, proving to be as bright as his parents had hoped. The twins, Alice and Rose, were bundles of energy who kept everyone on their toes. They loved the hotel, treating it as their personal playground and charming guests with their antics. Katherine and Preston settled into a rhythm that balanced business, family, and their relationship. They still found time for each other, stealing moments alone after the children were in bed, talking about their dreams and plans. The hotel had been their first dream realized together, but they continued to dream about expanding to other towns, about creating a legacy that would last generations. One evening in 1887, as they sat on the front porch watching the sunset, Preston turned to Katherine with a thoughtful expression. "Do you ever think about that first day we met?" he asked. "When I showed up looking for work and you were clutching those blueprints?" "I think about it often," Katherine said. "I was so close to giving up. Everyone had mocked me so thoroughly that I was starting to believe they were right, that my dreams were foolish." "But you did not give up," Preston said, "even when it would have been easier." "I could not," Katherine said simply. "Those dreams meant too much. This hotel, what it represents, who I wanted to be, I could not let that go." Preston took her hand, the gesture as natural after 9 years of marriage as breathing. "I am glad you did not, and I am glad I was brave enough to say dream with me, because everything good in my life started that day." Katherine leaned against him, watching as the sky turned from blue to pink to purple. Their children were inside, likely causing some kind of mischief. Their hotel stood behind them, solid and successful. Their life together had been built brick by brick, dream by dream, and it was more beautiful than anything Katherine could have imagined alone. "I love you," she said softly. "Thank you for believing in me." "I love you too," Preston said, "and I always will. You are the strongest, most remarkable woman I have ever known. Believing in you was the easiest thing I ever did." The years continued to pass, bringing both challenges and triumphs. The hotel weathered economic downturns and booms in the mining industry. Katherine and Preston navigated the complexities of raising 3 children while running a business. Thomas grew into a responsible young man who showed interest in taking over the hotel someday. Alice and Rose, as different as 2 people could be despite being twins, each found their own paths. Alice loved the business side, always asking to help with the books, while Rose was drawn to cooking and hospitality. In 1895, when Thomas was 16, Alice and Rose were 13, and Katherine and Preston were in their early 40s, they made a decision that surprised everyone. They decided to open a second hotel in Colorado Springs. It was a risk, expanding beyond Cripple Creek, but they had learned so much over the years that they felt ready for the challenge. Thomas, mature beyond his years, offered to help manage the Cripple Creek Hotel while his parents set up the new establishment. It was a testament to how well they had raised him, to his competence and reliability. Katherine was proud but also emotional about how quickly he had grown up. The Colorado Springs Hotel, which they named Parker House in honor of Preston's contribution to their success, opened in the spring of 1896. It was larger than the Townsend Hotel, with 30 rooms and full dining facilities. Katherine and Preston spent 6 months there, getting it established and training staff, before returning to Cripple Creek. By the turn of the century, the Parker family had become synonymous with quality hospitality in Colorado. They owned 2 successful hotels, had raised 3 accomplished children, and had proven that a woman could not only run a business but excel at it. Katherine was occasionally asked to speak to groups of young women about her experiences, and she always told them the same thing. Dream big, work hard, and find someone who believes in your dreams as much as you do. In 1902, on their 23rd wedding anniversary, Preston surprised Katherine with a special gift. He had commissioned a painting of the Townsend Hotel as it looked that first day they met, nothing but an empty lot with possibilities. Next to it hung a photograph of the hotel as it stood now, grand and thriving. "I wanted you to see how far we have come," Preston said as they stood in their private quarters looking at the artwork. "From dirt and dreams to something real and lasting." Katherine studied both images, remembering the fear and uncertainty of those early days, the mockery and doubt she had faced. "We did it," she whispered. "We really did it." "You did it," Preston corrected, as he had so many times over the years. "I just made sure you were not alone while you did it." "That made all the difference," Katherine said, turning to embrace her husband. "You made all the difference, Preston. You saw me when others would not. You believed in me when it would have been easier to laugh like everyone else. You gave me the courage to keep going. And you gave me purpose," Preston said. "You gave me a reason to build something meaningful. You gave me a family and a life beyond anything I imagined when I was that dusty cowboy riding into Cripple Creek." They stood together, holding each other in the home they had built, surrounded by the evidence of dreams made real through love, determination, and partnership. Their children were grown or nearly so, their businesses were thriving, and their love had only deepened with time. The Townsend Hotel continued to operate successfully well into the new century. Thomas eventually took over management, running it with the same integrity and care his parents had instilled. Alice opened a restaurant in Denver, applying the hospitality lessons she had learned growing up in the hotel. Rose married a kind man who ran a general store and raised a family of her own, always making sure to teach her daughters that they could dream as big as they wanted. Katherine and Preston lived long, full lives, remaining active in their businesses well into their 60s. They traveled occasionally, visiting cities across the West, and always evaluating hotels with the critical eye of experienced hoteliers. But they always returned to Cripple Creek, to the town that had watched Katherine be mocked for her dreams and had eventually celebrated her success. In 1923, at the age of 67, Katherine sat on the front porch of the Townsend Hotel, now run by her son but still bearing her family name. Preston, at 70, sat beside her as he had for 44 years of marriage. They watched their grandchildren play in the yard, 5 of them now with another on the way. "You have any regrets?" Preston asked, a question he posed every few years. "Not a single one," Katherine said immediately. "Every hardship, every moment of doubt, every person who mocked me led me to this. To you, to our family, to everything we built together. How could I regret any of it?" "I feel the same way," Preston said. He looked at the hotel, at the building that had started as impossible dreams sketched on paper. "We made something good here, Kate, something that will outlast us." "We did," Katherine agreed, "because you said dream with me, because you made my impossible dreams feel possible." Preston turned to her, his creek water eyes still as warm as they had been that first day. "They were never impossible. They just needed someone brave enough to pursue them. You were always that brave, Kate. I just made sure you knew it." They sat together as the Colorado sun painted the sky in colors that never got old, in the shadow of the dreams they had made real together, surrounded by the family and legacy they had built. Katherine thought about the young woman she had been, standing alone with blueprints and hope, not knowing that a dusty cowboy was about to walk into her life and change everything. She thought about all the moments that had led them here, the struggles and triumphs, the fears and victories. And she knew with absolute certainty that finding Preston had been the greatest dream she never knew to wish for. He had not saved her, had not rescued her from her circumstances. Instead, he had stood beside her and said, "I believe in you," when the rest of the world said she would fail. That belief, that partnership, that love had made all the difference. As stars began to appear in the darkening sky, their grandchildren were called inside for dinner. Katherine and Preston remained on the porch a little longer, hands clasped, hearts full. "Thank you," Katherine said softly. "For what?" Preston asked. "For seeing me, for believing in me, for dreaming with me." Preston raised her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "Thank you for letting me. Thank you for being brave enough to share your dreams. Thank you for building this beautiful life with me." They went inside together, into the hotel that had started as one woman's impossible dream, and had become a testament to what 2 people could create when they chose to believe in each other. The Townsend Hotel stood strong against the Colorado night, its windows glowing with warm light, its legacy secured for generations to come. Katherine and Preston had proved that dreams mocked by others could still come true, that a woman could build an empire, that a cowboy with faith in someone else's vision could find his own purpose. They had shown that the most powerful thing in the world was not money or status or the approval of others, but the courage to dream and the love to make those dreams real together. And in the end, that was the greatest legacy of all. Not just the hotels or the business success, but the love story that had built them. The story of a woman who refused to give up and a man who refused to let her dream alone. The story of Katherine and Preston Parker, who had looked at an empty plot of land and seen possibilities, who had faced mockery and doubt and chosen to believe anyway, who had built not just a hotel but a life, a family, a future that would inspire generations to come. Their story became the foundation upon which their family was built. Thomas told it to his children, who told it to theirs. Alice wrote it down in a journal that became a family treasure. Rose ensured that every family gathering included the tale of how Grandma Katherine had been mocked for her dreams, until Grandpa Preston said, "Dream with me, and we will make them real." The Townsend Hotel operated continuously for over 70 years, surviving economic depressions, world wars, and the decline of mining in Cripple Creek. It remained in the Parker family through 4 generations, a living monument to the power of determination, partnership, and love. Katherine lived to see her 81st birthday, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, in the hotel she had built against all odds. Preston passed away peacefully at 85, having spent 60 years with the woman he loved. When Katherine followed him 6 months later, having lost her will to continue without her partner, they were buried side by side on a hill overlooking Cripple Creek, with a view of the hotel that had been their first shared dream. On their shared headstone, placed there by their children, was inscribed a simple phrase: "They dreamed together and made it real." And in Cripple Creek, where a young woman had once been mocked for having the audacity to dream of building a hotel, the Townsend establishment stood as proof that some dreams are too powerful to be diminished by doubt, too important to be abandoned in the face of mockery, and too beautiful not to be pursued with everything you have, especially when you find someone who says, "I will dream with you, and together we will make them real."